All right. What's up, everyone? This is Isaac with Hunger Smash Fitness coming to you once again with my highly esteemed co-host, John, over at My Block Strongest Man. And today we have someone who is incredibly better at talking than either of us because he does it for a living. Joining us is Big Mo. If you watched the Eddie versus Thor fight, that's probably where you saw him. He was the announcer there. So right off the bat, Big Mo, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Awesome. Well, first off, Isaac, John, thank you guys for having me on. I connected with John while I was in Dubai getting ready for the Eddie versus Thor fight. But my name is Cody Momarts. I go by Big Mo. I am a professional ring announcer for combat sports. I've gained some popularity because I'm the youngest ring announcer in the world. I'm 26 years old. I know probably the people that watch this aren't as familiar with boxing and MMA. So basically, the ring announcer is the individual that's in the middle of the ring. Have you ever heard Let's Get Ready to Rumble by Michael Buffer? He was kind of the first big name as a ring announcer. So it's typically an older demographic of people to do the job. So I'm kind of crafting and building my own route in this. It's a very niche industry, and I've had a lot of fun, and it's gotten to open up amazing doors for myself. Eddie Thor was a massive one for me, and it was able to have me connect with the strongman industry. So it's been cool, just the journey that I've had so far, and I'm excited to talk to you guys a little bit about it and strongman also.
Yeah, we're excited about it as well. And I want to actually dive into who was your favorite ring announcer coming up. But Isaac, can I ask you a favor? I mean, somebody of this caliber coming from this industry, I think deserves a proper introduction. Is it okay with you if I share a file I put together earlier?
Yeah, go ahead and do that.
All right, let's do that.
Oh no, what's this? Surprises.
John's more of our analytics guy. He's the one who does most of the advertising and all that sort of stuff. He has fantastic stuff. Oh, here we go. Let's get it shared.
Ladies and gentlemen, now approaching the ring. He stands 6 feet 7 inches tall and weighs in at 292 pounds, hailing from Denver, Colorado, and not needing an introduction the world over. He is known as the 101st Rocky Mountain. Ladies and gentlemen, Big Mo, Cody Momarts!
Oh my God! Wow.
I see her rolling up, Uber black Cadillac, high heel boots and a sexy body full of tats. Baby's bad, oh baby's hella bad. After her there ain't no coming back. Wanna take a run at that. I think she's feeling me, turn it up.
Amazing.
Thank you, YouTube, for the awesome free music.
Amazing. How much did you say I weighed?
Hey, buddy, I looked you up. I put your playing weight, 292.
Okay, you put my playing weight. I was going to say I haven't been that heavy in a long time, but I appreciate it. That was awesome. Thank you.
I tried to get it right. See, so I looked at your IG today, and I saw you had something about Ric Flair in there. So I said, let me do this like Howard Finkel would do it. He'll appreciate it.
Yes, well, you nailed it. You're going to put me out of a job.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I got to get some tips from you, though. But yeah, who was your favorite coming up? Either boxing or MMA or strongman, whoever.
So, I mean, for me, with announcers, whenever I kind of start something, whether it be a hobby or a career, I immediately jump to that. If I'm really going to dedicate myself to it, I want to be the best at it, and I want to be the best and the biggest ring announcer in the world. I think that I can be. I think that I have a tremendous head start on a lot of people, and I think I'm attacking the industry a little bit differently. So, with that, I looked to people that I thought were the best. And in my opinion, the best are the Buffer brothers, Michael Buffer in boxing and Bruce Buffer in mixed martial arts in the UFC. So those two, in my opinion, are the gold standard, each in their own respects and each in their own sports. So those were my favorite growing up and still are to this day.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people would pick those two guys. So I always have to kind of go off on a tangent. I like the less over the top and more kind of just standard, always good Jimmy Lennon Jr.
Oh, well, Jimmy Lennon, I mean, he's, how I kind of look at it is Jimmy is just, he's consistent. He's smooth. He articulates well, very classy, that type of thing. I'm a big Jimmy Lennon Jr. fan also.
Yeah. So why don't you tell us a little bit about how did you get approached for Eddie versus Thor? I don't know if you want to jump into that topic right away, but that's how a lot of us have gotten to know you. And how were you approached for that gig?
So it was really interesting how it all happened. So how I've approached my career is I'm never afraid to be told no. I'll reach out to anyone. I'll always kind of shoot my shot with it all. Obviously, people will tell me no, that type of thing, but that's really the worst that can happen. So I remember when Eddie and Thor got announced initially, I was like, okay, like this is kind of interesting here. So what I did is I sent a message, a cold outreach to the promotion, and I said, if you're going to have the biggest boxing match, you should have the biggest announcer. And they actually liked the idea. That ended up not being the reason why. They obviously just liked me as an announcer, and I happened to be a bigger guy. But that's kind of how I think I showed a little personality in that message. I think that it was unique and it stood out. And so they liked the idea. But then obviously, with the various world situations and Eddie tearing his bicep, the fight got pushed off. And then it was about end of February, early March. The agent that I work with was talking to the promoter about maybe me doing events in the future. And then I guess they just were curious if I was available for the Eddie versus Thor fight. And I was like, heck yeah, I'm available. So it all came together, over the course of, it was an overnight thing, but over the course of, probably, I don't know, 18 months, 20 months. So yeah, no, that's how it all came about. And it was amazing. It was an amazing experience.
You're muted, John.
Sorry. What was your favorite part about the whole experience?
Oh, wow. I mean, there's too many. I mean, the fight itself probably would be one for me. I mean, it was cool because I grew up actually a big fan of strongman. I remember watching on ESPN. I was a huge Mariusz Bujanowski fan. He was the guy that when I started watching was really, it was him and Phil Pfister, Big Z, things like that. That's who I kind of got introduced to the sport with. So I knew who Eddie and Thor were. And I appreciated Eddie and Thor because they, in my opinion, and this is not to detract from other strongman, but I think they figured out how to brand themselves outside of strongman the best. So I became fans of them for a variety of ways. So I was a fan of Half Thor when he came onto the scene as the powerlifter because I thought he could be the best, to be honest. That's how I kind of looked at him. I think a lot of the strongman industry looked at it in the same vein. And then I became a fan of Eddie Hall through watching the strongman, but then I started watching his content outside of strongman. He did a couple TV shows, his vlogging and things like that. So I became a fan of them equally. And then Thor did Game of Thrones and all that kind of stuff. So I was big fans of both of them. So really just getting to work with them was awesome. And they are both stand-up guys. That was one thing that I wasn't sure of, is I had no idea what their personalities were. Whenever you see someone, I'm sure people have misconceptions about me, and then they meet me and I think I'm a nice guy, and hopefully they think the same thing too. But like when you meet people, you really never know what they're going to be like. And they both were stand-up guys. I mean, that was cool for me because, we only see them as, picking something up really heavy and psyching themselves up and putting themselves in whatever mind state they have to, or, we see them getting ready for a boxing match and things like that. So that was cool being able to work with them. Obviously, I thought the show was great. I thought the fight was great. The press conference was interesting. So no, I mean, it was cool. It was cool being around the strongman industry. I mean, I hung out with Terry Hollins. I remember watching Terry Hollins. I got to work with Big Laws. I remember watching Lawrence when he was a strongman. So it was cool being around those people. It was cool being in an industry that was new for me. It was cool being around people my height, So it was just, there's too many things to count. And Dubai was incredible as well. So give you a favorite part. That's an impossible question.
All of them. All of them are the favorite parts. Yeah. It's interesting because it's interesting what you say about trying to gauge people's personalities and whatnot. In strongman, I think it's the opposite. You kind of stereotype to expect really nice people in strongman unless proven otherwise. It's just it's a very different thing from the rest of everyday life. They're all so nice.
Yes. No, and that was that's what I gathered really quickly. None of them there were standoffish. None of them there were, holier than thou mentality, that type of thing. It was cool seeing them outside of the competitive mode. It was cool seeing how much of family-oriented people they were. I sat next to Eddie and his son during the press conference, and I was talking to his son a little bit, trying to have his son get a little comfortable because I could tell he was a little nervous, and talking to Eddie a little bit. And then I had ran into Thor in the hotel and talked to Thor a little bit, and was able to talk to his wife and his family. So it was cool seeing him out of the competition mode.
Yeah, absolutely. I got to give you kudos though for translating your offensive lineman skills to that press conference. Like at first I'm thinking, how's he holding Thor back? Then I did a little bit of Googling and I'm like, that's how he held Thor back.
I mean, look, it was so all that. Number one, none of that was staged. There's conversations on the internet about that being, scripted. No. So I showed up for the press conference. Not sure what the setup was going to be. I didn't know if I was going to be at a podium. I didn't know if I was going to be sitting down. I've hosted press conferences before. I didn't know who would be up there with them. So then when we got there, I was like, okay, I wonder if, Eddie put his son on the inside to almost be like a subconscious buffer to him not to do anything. Then their coaches were joined. Then Thor sat next to me. So I wasn't sure what was going to happen. And then the press conference started off kind of not slow, but like I kind of felt like they were filling the whole thing out. I don't think they had done a real press conference like this, because I know Thor had done one for his previous fight, but that was against an opponent that was a fill-in. So I don't think either of them were sure how to handle it. And then they started talking some trash and things like that, and then took some jabs at family. And I was sitting there like, I've seen this before. It's never good when the families get brought up. And then they stood up once, got in the middle of them. I think they got them separated, and then they stood up again. And then I think more so it wasn't me necessarily holding back Thor. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think I'm a stronger than usual guy, but I think more so what it was is I think Thor recognized that he had to get through me to get to Eddie. And I think he just didn't. I'm not sure how worth it that would be, because that could lead to people tripping over chairs. And I think Thor could risk hurting himself, or Eddie could risk hurting himself, and the whole fight would be off. So I think that's why Thor just picked up the can of rain and stuff like that. So, I mean, it all happened so quick, and it was all of that was real. The bitterness was real. I remember going into it, it was very clear that they had to be separated. It was very clear that one was going to enter first, the other was going to enter separately. And that's the thing I didn't know. I didn't know how intense their rivalry was. I didn't know the ins and outs and the intricacies of it all. And so I did a lot of research leading up to it. I watched videos and people talking about the rivalry and the history of it all. So no, it was 100% real. I'm glad to see that, from what I can tell, they've squashed the beef a little bit, which is great. But I do think that the beef led to an exciting fight too. So part of me, I can appreciate when two rivals want to go at it.
Yeah. So you've been front row for actual pro boxing. How did this compare skill wise?
So I am glad that you asked that question, John, because I want people to understand that fight surprised everybody. Okay. Going in, and this is what I was nervous about. I was really nervous about this after the press conference. I was nervous that they were just going to run in head first, and it was just going to be an ugly brawl. And the reason why I was nervous about that was that when fighters clinch up and a referee tries to separate them, if the fighters don't separate, that can lead to point deductions. That can lead to a variety of problems with the fight. So I was nervous of them just throwing about the rule book and just having this be an all-out brawl. But it wasn't. They legitimately tried to box. It was very clear that Thor's technique was more advanced. I think we all knew that going in. He had fights under his belt. He clearly, I think, just had more experience than Eddie did. Eddie was going for that big shot, which I think is what he had to do. I don't think Eddie's strategy was wrong by any means. But it was an impressive fight. I mean, look, what else could you have asked for? Seriously, it was a super heavyweight fight with 3, arguably 4 knockdowns in it, 2 on each side if you're going with the 4. Combinations were being thrown. The crowd was into it. So the referee that we flew in, his name was Hector Afu. He was either the WBO or the WBC referee of the year last year. We flew him in from Panama to do this fight. And he came up to me after the show and he goes, "That is one of the more entertaining boxing matches I've ever seen." Was it the most technical thing in the world? No. Did anyone expect it to be? No. But I think it surprised a lot of people. I think Thor surprised a lot of people. I actually think Eddie surprised a lot of people. I think that the fact that we had 700 pounds worth of man make it 6 rounds surprised everybody. So to answer your question, one of the more entertaining fights that I've ever been in. I think top to bottom, everything encapsulated with the show, I think made it entertaining. But I was very pleasantly surprised. And I hope everyone watching it was too.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would argue some of the stuff Thor was doing was fairly technical. That timing of the 1-2 that he did while Eddie switched stances in front of him, where he picked him off just at the exact right moment, that's not something that someone that doesn't know how to box can do. You know, it's some of the stuff he was doing was pretty technical and frankly far advanced over his last fight against Devin Larratt. I don't know if you caught that one. So I don't know if Thor was ended up being the guy holding back on camera like Eddie kept saying he was doing, or Thor actually improved that much in that amount of time. One of those two things happened, but he looked far, far superior to what he did against Devin Larratt.
No, I agree. And both of them, I think, and this is what's cool for me to watch, is both of them are high-performing athletes. And both of them, I think, are taking a real approach to boxing. Thor especially. I can't speak on Eddie because he just hasn't been doing it as long. But 1, both of them lost a tremendous amount of weight. Hats off to both of them for doing that. 2, they both improved their cardio. They both made it the full 6 rounds, which is not easy, especially while you're getting punched and knocked down. So I think both of them are really trying to become boxers. I believe Thor, I think if he dedicates himself to it, could actually turn this into somewhat of a career. Do I think that Thor is ever going to challenge for a world title? No. But do I think that Thor could have a couple decent-sized fights, maybe against this athlete celebrity type of fight? Yes. Do I think after a few more fights he could challenge a lower-ranked pro heavyweight? I would be open to it. I mean, again, when it comes
think about it this way: Nikolai Valuev challenged for a world title. Is Thor that much worse than him at that size?
I mean, that's the whole thing, is that there's the intangible here that a lot of people aren't talking about. So boxing has got a lot of attention recently with Jake Paul and, doing those all the celebrity fights and things like that. Here's what people don't understand. Thor was a professional basketball player in Iceland and then was one of the most accomplished strongmen in recent history. So he's not a TV personality. He's not an actor. He became an actor after all that stuff. He's a high-performing athlete that knows how to train, knows how to dedicate to a sport. He's just directing that focus to something else. So I think this is really interesting and really unique. And then you compound that with the fact that he's 6'9" and one of the world's strongest men, obviously makes it interesting as well. So again, I think that he might be onto something here. I mean, I think the drawback is he's a little old to start his career. Preferably you want to start in your 20s if you had to choose. But I don't know, man. He was throwing some good combos. He's got a good coach. His cardio was pretty solid. He stayed composed after getting knocked down. I mean, I want to see him keep boxing. So
Me too. Yeah, and I'll be honest, I'm not going to pretend I was Team Eddie all along, but you got to give Thor his due. He did very well. And just a real quick reminder to everybody, if you haven't liked this stream yet, please go ahead and subscribe to Isaac here at Hunger Smash Fitness. And when we're all done here, we'll tell you how to follow the rest of us and go subscribe to me at my blog Strongest Man. But Isaac, why don't you jump in with a few things? I don't want to take up all the time myself here.
Yeah, thanks. I was going to ask, during the press conference, because the second time Thor stood up, it looked like they had probably like 20-some guys run up and separate the two and everything. Were those all security that were on standby, or were those members of each of their team, or how did that work? Was that just in case?
So one, I know they called in or I know they already had security, but I know that I think they got more after the run-in that Eddie and Thor had at the gym. So I think they brought in extra security. Then I know Thor had his own entourage and Eddie had his own entourage. So if you count the entourages and security, I would say the total number of people there that were at least trying to separate them was, I don't know, 30 people, not including myself. And so the thing is like, yeah, it was a mixture of security and entourages. And that's what I found that so funny about the whole thing too, was like, and the referee and the same, I had the same thought about the referee during the fight, but it's like they haven't dealt with people this big. And that was interesting for me to experience. You have to understand, I'm 6'7", 225. When I was a football player, I was 6'7". My heaviest, I was about 310, 315. I'm used to being a really, really big guy, bigger than 99% of the population. These two are so big. It's like off-putting. Like it was weird for me standing next to Thor and be like, holy, like what? And then what's crazy is they have the same wingspan, but that's because the wingspan includes shoulder width, and Eddie is literally this wide. So it was amazing being around people that big, but I think that the security almost were like, oh, these guys are like really huge. Like, and the security that was brought in, those are bad dudes in and of themselves. So we needed it. So yeah, no, a lot of security, a lot of entourage involved in that press conference.
Yeah, it was quite interesting to watch and just see the flood of people that came onto the stage. And I was like, well, they're all dressed fairly similarly, so I'm assuming they're all paid security or something, but it definitely makes sense just because, I mean, we've seen a ton of other feats of strength that these two guys have done, and it's one of those things where, yeah, they're a little lighter now. They're not training to the same like max force capacity that they have in the past. But if they actually snapped, yeah, they could do a lot of damage. Yeah. And it's interesting too because I've got to meet a lot of pro strongmen, or not a lot, but several pro strongmen in the past. And I've met, Brian Shaw and Robert Oberst and stuff like that. And it's so interesting because, yeah, I'm 6'5" and about 300 pounds. And when I met Brian, it was the first time in my life where I was like, I'm really tiny. Like I feel really small next to this guy. And I've been around a lot of people that are either heavier or taller than me or whatever else, visited the Netherlands once and I was like, oh, half the people are taller than me here, but they're all string beans, and like, that was the first time when I met Brian where I was like, this is a massive dude. And then you have Eddie and Thor who are both, insanely strong and ridiculously big as well. And so it's just one of those things where as soon as I saw all these black shirts running onto the stage, I was like, I wonder how many of those are paid to be there just in case.
Yeah, no, that's there was a lot of security, and it's a good thing we had them because when that all broke out, so what was crazy was, so when that all broke out, the press conference ended because there was no way to go back to what we were doing. There's no way to settle them down. So Eddie's team left, and then some stragglers of Thor's team went after him almost, or left after him. So it was like, okay, well, now we have a public issue to deal with. It's not just contained to this room anymore. And that's why we moved the weigh-ins too, was again, like their rivalry was so bitter at that moment. And it hit such a climax of tension at that moment. We were going to do public weigh-ins and everything. And it was, again, and like you said, Isaac, they're so big that if they chose to get mad, they could do a tremendous amount of damage, property damage, let alone people damage, right? So it was one of those things as to where, like, do we go and do this and have public, or do we just control it in this room, separate them both, no fans, they weigh in, they look at each other from a distance. Like if you watch the weigh-ins, we had tables in front of each of them, the scale and the commission between the tables, and we had them on clear opposite sides. Again, like I if there's one thing I want people to understand watching this, none of this was all decided on like on the spot. Like I was talking to the promoter, like, all right, we're going to do this. I've seen this happen. I was talking to him from my experience of doing weigh-ins and stuff like that with rivals. But again, like this wasn't a normal rivalry. This was a rivalry of two of the strongest people on the planet who for the last couple of years have also been boxing. So again, it's like these are people that you just don't want to rile up. So it's crazy.
Yeah, the moment it became the most apparent to me was in the ring when Eddie came into the ring and they had security, like 4 or 5 security cornering him off like they used to do with Mike Tyson at his most aggressive. And that's when it hit me. I'm like, oh my God, like he's really, really mad. Like,
so that was my idea. So I was talking to the promoter the night before the show. We had a production meeting that night where we go through the run through and the commentary and the lights and the camera and all that type of stuff. And I told the promoter, I go, we need security in the ring. And he's like, won't that mess up the vibe? And I go, no, Mike Tyson and Lennox Lewis, when they fought, they had security separate them in the ring. He goes, oh, okay, that's not a bad idea. So he had security in it. And then I don't know if you guys noticed during the fight, but I don't know if one security guard wasn't paying attention, but we had the line of security going diagonal. Eddie and Thor just walked around security and then got face to face in the middle of the ring. It was like, luckily, they didn't do anything and they had themselves controlled at that point. But I was like looking at security, like, hello, like, what are you guys doing? So no, the Mike Tyson thing, you're 100% right, John. That was my thought to the promoter.
Yeah, kudos on that. I mean, not that I want people to attack each other or anything, but if anything, it enhanced the vibe. It didn't kill the vibe.
Look, that was a question that was posed to me. Look, I don't like how it got out of control. You never want that. No. It's a safety hazard, all that type of stuff. You never want to get out of control. But would I prefer to have a boxing match where the two people don't like each other? Kinda, yeah. I think that makes for a better fight. Don't get me wrong. I want them to respect each other, but I don't want them to be best friends and go in there and just hug each other. Like I want hands to be thrown. I would prefer a fight where they both want to win, where it's an intense rivalry. I like they had some stakes on the line with the charity and the tattoo and all that type of stuff. That all just adds, in my opinion, to a more exciting fight. But I don't like that it got out of hand.
Have you, in the boxing world, what's a fight that comes to mind where something like that happened, where there was just a genuine rivalry and it made for a great fight? And I have one in mind where they actually fought twice and the guy in my mind who was the hero came out on top in the end. But do you have a fight like that in mind where there was just an intense rivalry and it made for a great fight?
I mean, the most heated rivalry in recent time is Conor and Habib. I mean, that's the most heated rivalry that I can think of, and I do think it led to a good fight. It went 4 rounds. Habib ended up winning, but I thought it was a pretty good fight. But that got even more out of hand after that fight. So again, you want that heated rivalry, but you do want it to stay kind of calm and collected. I think that, Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder in the heavyweight boxing realm, I think they genuinely didn't like each other. They kept it reasonably controlled. So again, I think that's a good example of having two very competitive people. I don't think it got too out of hand. Yeah, they shoved each other during a press conference, but that happens out of 1 out of 3 press conferences anyway. So that one comes to mind. But yeah, it's you don't want to get out of control, but I like it to be a little bit heated.
Yeah, the one I had in mind was Antonio Margarito Miguel Cotto. So when they fought the first time, there was I'll call it Glovegate, and then they fought again, and Cotto showed his skill and won like he should win, and it was just a great comeback.
You're a boxing fan, John.
I'm a huge boxing fan.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I was going to say, you dropped that reference. I was like, all right, you might be on something here.
Oh, I should have told you. First of all, I'm 20 years older than you are, so I've seen quite a few fights.
Sure.
Yeah, but no, the first fight I think I ever remember seeing was Mike Tyson, Pinklin Thomas, believe it or not.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Early. That was early, if I remember.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, no, I've seen quite a few fights. I'll tell you some stories off the air later.
I love it.
Jump on in, Isaac.
No, that's fine. To be honest, I don't follow boxing nearly as much as I probably should. I followed when I was in the military. I followed a bunch of the UFC stuff just because they would always buy the pay-per-view.
The demographic. Yeah.
Demographic pretty good. Yeah. So so I always loved watching the MMA fights and everything. And I've done like I did judo and Muay Thai for several years growing up, but being 6'5", judo's not suit.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I can't fall hard, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like the Ippon Seoinage or whatever, like over the shoulder throw. I was like, I have to like sit down on the ground to do that to anybody. It doesn't work. It just
I think, Isaac, you just made a good point. And I think in your intro video that you made, John, you had a quote of mine on one of my pictures, and you asked me what my favorite experience was from the trip. I'll tell you. A big career goal of mine. People ask me all the time, like, well, what brand do you want to announce for? What show do you want to announce for? I really don't care per se. What I care about is, in my opinion, I love combat sports in the same way that you guys love strongman. I believe it's the best sport on the planet. If you ask you probably guys would say the strongman is the best sport on the planet, as you should. You guys are fans of the sport. But for me, what it's about is I want to take combat sports and introduce it to different industries. So I've told this story before, but obviously I doubt any of your viewers have watched this because I've really only done fighting and combat sports stuff. But how I got so kind of into the sport, specifically on the entertainment side, was when I was in college. Whenever me and my buddies would have a pregame before a party or a bar or stuff like that, I would sometimes put the fights on because they'd be a Friday or a Saturday night. And none of my friends understood the sport, not to my extent. I was a fan for a long time before that, but none of them knew who was fighting. They didn't know the rules. They didn't know where the fight was taking place. They probably didn't even know the brand it was, all that kind of stuff. But what they did know and what they could relate to was when the lights went down, when it was main event time, when it was 2 guys in the ring. It wasn't 22 guys on a football field or 10 guys on a basketball court. It was just 2 guys. The crowd was split, country versus country, different fighting styles, the ring announce. They could understand that feeling. They could really get that. And that's what I got hooked on. And that's why I love being a ring announcer. Is I personally love the entertainment side of the sport more than I love the sports side of the sport. I just love the build of a fight. I can't explain the energy that comes from it. And it was cool for me because my career goal is to take that feeling and introduce it to people and have them feel it. In my opinion, the ring announcer kind of sets the stage for that. And again, nothing to take away from other ring announcers, but I think a lot of them are a little dry for my taste. I don't think they're as exciting as they could be. So I want to set that stage for people. So it was amazing for me to have a boxing match where the mass majority of the viewership weren't boxing fans. And I got to be their introduction to the sport. That was my favorite experience. To answer your question from earlier, by far that was my favorite experience. So Isaac, you were saying that you didn't follow boxing. Well, guess what? Probably 90% of the viewers, if not more, didn't follow boxing either. So I hope that what that fight did more than anything else was, 1, settle a rivalry, but 2, I hope a portion of those strongman fans or the fans of Eddie and Thor said, you know what? This boxing stuff ain't half bad. I'm gonna try giving a boxing match a go one time. So I'm glad you brought that point up, Isaac.
Yeah, and I could see it. I mean, and it's something where it was definitely entertaining. And I had 4 or 5 buddies over, and we had pizza and beer, and I think one of the guys was rooting for Thor. I think everybody else was rooting for Eddie. And so it was kind of interesting just because, it was fun. Like all the smack talk beforehand or whatever. I was like, oh, it feels like, when we watch World's Strongest Man together or something like that. Like it feels very similar, similar vibe. And it's something where I hope Thor does do more fights. I don't know if Eddie has any dreams of boxing or anything else. He's already doing so much other stuff that I don't know if it's even.
He says he is.
Yeah,
he is doing more boxing.
That's what he said.
Yeah, that's what he said. Yeah, he wants to. So We'll see.
I don't know. We'll have to see. I guess he'll have to get his bicep fixed up there.
It was clearly affecting him during the fight, and he talked about that too. So.
Well, and that was one of the things too. Is I was like, I'm not a boxer, but like I've seen enough fighting to know that like something's off with him. Like I don't know anybody who fights with that style.
Well, no, and Isaac, you're right, and the internet was going in on Eddie, and a lot of people were criticizing his style. Look, let's give some credit to Eddie. Okay, Eddie did have a boxing coach. He did train. Eddie wasn't doing that stance for no reason. There was a reason behind it. His left arm was clearly affecting him. I think that he thought that if he turned, at least that would create more distance because he probably was having issues raising his arm. He probably was having issues blocking, and Thor was leading with that jab. And so for Eddie, it probably was more of a defense mechanism. So all the people that were giving Eddie crap about his technique, listen, was he Floyd Mayweather? No. But was he someone that just thought that that was the right technique? I don't think so. He was clearly affected by the bicep.
So don't get me going. Nobody's Floyd Mayweather.
Yeah, no, I agree.
I said I was older than you. I'm not old enough to know Sugar Ray Robinson and have watched him, but Floyd's the best fighter I've ever seen.
I would agree. It's hard to argue 50-0. It really is. And people say like, oh, well, he fought people out of his prime. Well, he still fought him and beat him. So it is what it is. So I agree. In my opinion, Floyd's it's hard. It's hard. The argument is hard for me to hear that he's not. So,
yeah, So this is more of a boxing question, and we can jump back into Eddie Thor, Isaac, if you want after. But so you probably have heard commentary teams say over the years, especially on HBO, about effective aggression, clean, effective punching, the ways that you judge boxing rounds, but you never hear them actually judge them that way. Like you'll hear, I don't want to like call names, but you'll hear the unofficial ringside announcer say, he landed all the clean punches. And I'm like, what about all the other three criteria that you mentioned? Right. So I've actually made spreadsheets like with all of the criteria and who I thought really won certain fights. So maybe offline we'll look at that together.
Well, I mean, ring control is tough to gauge. There is an aspect of the judging that is subjective. And this is the common complaint of boxing and MMA and really all combat sports is that unfortunately, if a fight goes the distance, it is in the hands of three people that weren't fighting. It is what it is. I think as a general rule, for the most part, they get it right. I think they got the scoring right on Eddie Thor. Thor won by unanimous decision, I think for sure. So yeah, there's always a bit of subjectivity, I guess, whatever the word is, to boxing scoring. But I agree with you. Sometimes it's a little disappointing.
Yeah, like for example, Mayweather McGregor, people were all saying like how well Conor did, and I'm like, if you look at those four categories, Conor didn't win a round.
I would disagree with you. I thought he won the first three or four, but again, that's the subjective piece of it. Is like you kind of get those. You get those moments where you kind of look at something a different way. So again, but that's neither of us are judges, so it is what it is. And I never will be, to be honest. So,
I was going to ask too because you mentioned Mariusz Pudzianowski earlier, and he's been doing UFC for a while, or MMA or whatever it is that he's doing. I haven't followed him very much, but what would be the chances of doing a Thor versus Mariusz fight?
To me, that makes a lot of sense. And Thor talked about it. So the two names that are being floated around is Martin Ford and Thor. Martin Ford was there. Martin Ford was talking a little trash. The height discrepancy is gone if Martin Ford fights him. I think that Martin has been training pretty heavily in boxing. From what I can tell, he looks like he's always been in great shape. I mean, of course, but he looks like he's been training a lot. So that fight is interesting. But the Mariusz fight is interesting, and here's why. So I guess Thor, I don't remember. I watched Thor's video in an airport, so I might have missed this, but it sounded like he said that Mariusz would only be interested if it was MMA. Thor's not going to fight MMA, and Mariusz would have just a massive landslide advantage. I actually think that them boxing makes sense because while Thor does have more boxing experience in terms of boxing matches, Marius has more boxing experience. Marius has been training MMA, therefore he has had boxing being a component of his training now for, I think he's been doing it for like 8-10 years. Maybe I'm not sure if my math is right there, but it's been a significant amount of time. So I actually think them boxing makes a reasonable amount of sense. And again, it sticks with the theme of the Titans and the strongman and the stuff like that, which I think would be cool. And I don't know, it's interesting because like a lot of the strongman community is kind of like happy that this is over. Which again, it's, people had different perceptions of the fight, but I kind of looked at it at the whole fight as a massive win for the sport of strongman. And you guys will know this better than me, and I'm curious what your guys' insights are. But how I looked at it was this kind of put strongman on a new platform, on a bit of a bigger platform. And I think that it kind of showed the sport off in a way that it hadn't had before. What are your, I mean, do you guys think that strongman benefited from this?
Absolutely. I mean, as you said earlier, everybody thought it was going to be a hugging brawl, and they both Thor more, but they both showed skill. So I think that it, gave people who don't know strongman well the idea now that, these are really skilled athletes who can take on a different career and excel at that given enough time.
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah, and I definitely agree because when they were both competing in strongman, they both had massive followings. I mean, there were people who were diehard Thor fans and diehard Eddie Hall fans, and and so in every competition that they did, you would always hear about it because so and so saying, oh, like Eddie did this with the axle, or vice versa or whatever. And so I think John, you have a really good point where they both not necessarily dominated, but yeah, they dominated in strongman in their own way in specific things and everything. And so it's really amazing seeing how well they did with that and then being able to transition to this. The one thing I hope doesn't happen is not all the other strongmen now are like, oh, I can get a $1.5 million purse if I just switch to boxing instead of doing, because there's not a lot of money in strongman. So
no, and that's a good point, is that we also need to understand that a big reason why the fight was so big is because it was two of the biggest names who also happened to have a rivalry and from various circumstances was able to build the fight for 2 years. When you're able to build a fight that long and you're able to put out that much content and that much trash talk, you're gonna do well. So the final, like for example, the final viewership number was we had 1.4 million live viewers, and I know that there were various complaints about the streams. I can't speak on that. I don't know anything about it. I don't work in production on that side, but I know that the official number for live viewers was 1.4 million. I know that. Yeah, and they both got paid well, from what I gather. I don't know what their specific numbers were, and I'm sure they both did well from a sponsorship standpoint. But I agree with you, Isaac. I wouldn't want the boxing to detract from strongman. I think that strongman still needs to be the focus, but at the same time, I think that I think if once a year, if a couple strongmen want to hop in a boxing ring and duke it out, and because what I learned, and I already knew this. But and John, you know this from being a boxing kind of fan and historian, is that the reason why the heavyweights are always the biggest seller is because they're the biggest. People just naturally are attracted and curious of the biggest, the strongest, the alpha, that type of thing. Well, this fight took it to a different level. These weren't just heavyweights. These were super heavyweights. These were Titan weight, as we called them. These were the biggest. So I think that pulled a lot of people in. And this is what I'm happy for strongman. And as someone that I know more about the sport than the average person, I don't know as much about strongman as you guys do, or Big Laws, or Thor, or Eddie, or Terry Hollins. I don't know nearly as much about the sport as they do. But what I do know is that I don't think strongman gets enough recognition. I don't think that it's nearly appreciated enough for what it is in terms of how insane what they are doing is. For example, when I played football, one of my best friends, still one of my best friends to this day, he was my teammate. I saw him squat 700 pounds on a back squat. Very impressive, right? One of the most impressive physical feats I've seen. What these world's strongest men guys do is it's a different, you can't even conceptualize the type of weight that they're moving. Like for a lot of people, they can't conceptualize a 500 kilogram deadlift. They can't conceptualize the Atlas stones, the dead weight, the barrels, all that. They can't even like, until you've done it, you don't even understand it. I don't even understand it. And I've watched hours and a ton of that content. So what I want is I do want people to, and in the same way that I hope that strongman fans like you, Isaac, were able to experience boxing, I also hope that the same happened vice versa. I hope that people that weren't fans of strongman went, damn, these guys are some pretty impressive athletes. Damn, they lost 100 pounds. How big were they before? How strong were they? And then they start watching strongman. I hope that it complemented both industries, and I think that it did. So really, what strongmen do is insane, and that's why I want to, I hope that my announcing career can maybe cross over into strongman soon. I think that my energy and my vibe kind of fits what the live strongman events are going for. But I mean, I hope people recognize that Eddie and Thor and all them are just athletes on an insane level in just a different way. I think that people are familiar with bodybuilding. I think that people are familiar with football and a lot of the big guy type of sports, but I don't think they are familiar with what strongmen do, which is like, I need to generate as much sheer power as humanly possible for a smaller increment of time. I mean, I was listening to Thor talk about this. And I didn't even realize this. He couldn't do cardio, not because he didn't want to, not because he didn't want to stay in shape, but he couldn't risk losing the calories on anything except for his specific lifts of being a strongman. That's crazy. Like that's completely backwards from a lot of athletic training, but it's because the sport of strongman is so unique. So again, it took my fandom of strongman to a different level, and I hope it introduced the sport to a lot of people that don't watch it.
Yeah, I agree. And it's even different than than even like powerlifting or something like that, because there is that blend where we have the some 1 rep max, whatever, but then you also have the 90-second event. And so you do have that's your cardio, is when you're pulling an airplane across the parking lot or something like that. And so it's a weird blend where it's not powerlifting, but it's not football, but you're not like, it doesn't fit any of those categories basically.
No. It's really its own thing.
Yeah, definitely. And John, I see that you just wanted to add something.
I did, yeah. You mind sharing the screen?
Yeah, here we go.
I might have to go back. All right, do you see it now?
Yep.
Yeah, so Cody, from what you were saying earlier about people trying to conceptualize what strongmen are doing, I always make the point of go do it yourself so you understand. So this is me in the woods, and I'm trying to that's a 210-pound stone I'm trying to get off the ground. You see, I get it almost to my knees. I believe this is literally half of what the guys had to get to their shoulders at the Arnold's this year. I think it was 420.
Jeez, and they had to do it 5 times. Atlas stones is 5, right?
Well, it wasn't Atlas. It was natural stone to shoulder.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but Martins Lisius did it twice.
Oh, Jesus, it's I don't know, man. It was cool, and I was able to talk about this with Laws a little bit. That was another cool thing, is I got to make some cool friends, and shout out to Big Laws, man. He was awesome to hang out with. Him and Liz were fantastic people. I hope I can work with him again. And Laws too, man. If you're watching this, man, boxing commentary, you were smooth, man. Like, I watched back and listened to the show. I thought Laws actually did a fantastic job as a boxing commentator. I thought he and Barry Jones played really well. But what I was saying is, it was cool talking to people in the industry about it, and like, it was interesting talking to Terry Hollins about it, because Terry Hollins now has kind of gone more into the bodybuilding realm. But what's crazy is they carry so much muscle that you don't see, because they have to carry a lot of mass, and they can't be 400 pounds of pure muscle. it's impossible. So they have to have a lot of body fat and things like that. And so it's crazy, like seeing that. And now you can see it with Terry, how much muscle he really had even before he was focused more on the aesthetic style of bodybuilding. And it's almost like he's almost too big, right? He's almost too he almost has too much mass. So it's cool. Like, I don't know, I'm like geeking out because again, like I grew up watching the World's Strongest Man. I've watched Marius win his 4th, and then I watched him win his 5th and all that type of stuff. And it was crazy when Marius did it because he was the most shredded strongman I've ever seen. He kind of flipped the whole industry on its head type of thing. So yeah, I like you said, John, it's go try it yourself. It's because it's a very different style of lifting. It's not what people are used to. People are used to, doing an 8 to 10 rep, range, maybe 6 reps if you're going to try to build your max. Maybe you do a 3 rep max. Very rarely is it, okay, I'm going to just dedicate this day to lifting this one time. It's crazy.
Yeah, it is. And by the way, shout out to Big Laz. He's been a really big help to my channel, and he knows it. And so I'm glad that you were able to spend some time with Laz and Liz. They're wonderful people, and I try to talk them up as much as I can. And he's the type too where he helps and doesn't brag about it, so nobody knows. But he's helped me out quite a lot.
He's a great guy. I'm really thankful I got to meet him.
Yeah.
Well, do you have any more fights coming up quickly or that you're preparing for?
I mean, yeah, I stay pretty busy. I think that, back on the fighting side, I think a big way that I've excelled so quickly is I stay very active. And I announce for multiple brands, and it is what it is. This is a very niche industry. I would say if you had to tally up the amount of ring announcers, like real professional ring announcers in the world, there's maybe 50 legitimately. And in fact, if you counted the ones that like travel for shows and do bigger events, there's maybe like 15. And so the thing is like I've learned that I had to, it is what it is, I had to replace announcers. Every single brand that I've worked for had an announcer before me. And I had to show them the various things that I do differently and the various ways that I can improve their show. So I stayed very active. I announced for, on the more local regional scene, I announced for Airtight Boxing out of Colorado. I announced for Sparta out of Colorado. On the more kind of national, international scene, XMMA, which is a newer MMA promotion. I actually just got back from New Orleans yesterday doing a show for them in New Orleans on Saturday. I do bare knuckle. I announced BYB, which is a bare knuckle brand. So I stay very active with it all. I'm always looking for new opportunities. I hope I can do, if Thor and Eddie fight again, I hope I can announce for them again. They both seem to enjoy my work. Thor especially was very complimentary of me after the fight. So shout out to Thor. Thank you for those kind words. So yeah, no, I stay active. I think the next fight that I right now have booked is end of May. I think I'll be doing a bare knuckle show in Mississippi. No, excuse me. I have Sparta's does an Army versus Marines show at the end of this year. It's an all-military themed pay-per-view where all the fighters are former military or current military, and they get in the cage or the boxing ring and fight. So I got that at the end of the month. So yeah, no, I stay busy with a lot of shows.
And do you compete at all yourself, or do you dabble in boxing or anything like that? Or
I do it sometimes training just for cardio, but I blew out my shoulder playing football. I still have problems with it, and I'm afraid that if I just too many jerking motions, it'll sublux out of place or dislocate, and I just don't want to deal with that again. And so I just do strength training and cardio training. I just like staying in good shape. I'll probably get that competitive itch again in me one of these days. I've kind of just been chilling since football's been over. I stay busy with being an entrepreneur and entertainer and stuff like that. So, but in terms of fighting, no, I don't fight. Maybe one day. We'll see.
And then I was just wondering, marketing is my downfall. I'm not very good at it. So how do you get new opportunities for MMA and boxing? Do you have management, or do you reach out yourself? Do you, email marketing teams? How does that all work?
That's a great question. And it's actually what you just brought up is the biggest reason why I've grown so quickly outside of my own abilities. I know social media pretty damn well. And I think it's because I grew up in the spike of it. And most of my competition, and again, this isn't detracting from them, but they're a bit of an older demographic, and I don't think they utilize it or leverage it as much as they should. I try to post 5 or 6 times a week on Instagram. I try to post almost daily on Twitter. I'm falling behind on. I try to post on TikTok consistently. So what I've figured out is what I do, especially being an entertainment-based brand, and you guys are an entertainment-based brand. You guys do this podcast or this show. This is a form of entertainment. What I've learned is it's about content, content, content. Every time you put something out, whether you guys take how I look at it, I'll give you an example. Let's say this show is an hour or an hour and 10 minutes, right? Theoretically speaking, that is 60 to 70 1-minute pieces of content that you could chop up. That is multiple pieces of micro content. How I look at a fight is if there's 10 fights on a card, that's 20 fighter introductions that I could turn into micro content and to put out in the ether and onto the internet. That is 20 opportunities for me to be seen. That is 20 opportunities for me to put myself in front of someone and they go, oh, he's actually not bad. Or even if they don't like me, they go, oh, yeah, no, thank you. That's fine. But again, I'm getting in front of people. That's how I'm able to grow. Most of my job opportunities have come through my activity on social media. They find me because I just put out so much of my work so consistently. There's so much stuff on the internet. If you don't put something out, you won't be seen. If you don't market your product, and the simplest way to market your product is just to put it on the internet and see if anyone gives a damn about it. If you don't do that, then how on earth would you expect to grow? That doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me. And I've had this conversation with other people and with brands that I've announced for too, is it's like an Instagram account is free. A TikTok account is free. You don't have to pay to run ads. I think it's a great way to utilize money and funds for a business, but you don't have to do it. You can put out content, and if it's sticky enough, then so be it. So marketing is huge for me. It's a massive component of what I do. I have been able to work with talented people on the production side. I've worked with a couple of videographers. I've figured out my ad spend really well on social media channels, and yeah, it's everything.
Yeah, I'll definitely be contacting you offline for some tips for sure.
I love it.
Nice. So another thing I was wondering, how did you get your first job announcing? Like, what's that whole story?
It's I've told this story before, but I love telling it because I think it's cool. So at the tail end of my football career, I started doing a lot of public speaking work, not like big events, but I was doing I think the biggest event I did was maybe in front of 250 people. But I've always been a very comfortable public speaker. I have always enunciated very well. I don't say or ha or whatever when I'm talking. I've always just been very comfortable with it. I don't get nervous in front of people. Public speaking is actually the number one fear amongst people. It's above dying, drowning, burning alive. Public speaking scares the shit out of people, let alone what I do. And so I've always been pretty comfortable with it. And one of my buddies after an event that I did said, have you ever tried commentary? Because that's a route that a lot of athletes take. Have you ever tried football or basketball commentary? And I said, no. And at the time I was pretty burnt out of football and basketball. I've been doing it my whole life. I just finished doing it in college for 5 years and stuff like that. And so I was like, no, thank you. But I always loved combat sports. I loved MMA. I loved boxing, kickboxing, all that stuff. So I was like, all right, well, let's see what's out there. And again, I told you, I'm never afraid to be told no. So I found the phone number for a regional promotion in Colorado, still announced for him today, called Sparta. Called him up, said, hey, I have no experience. You've never met me before. Would you be open to me auditioning as a commentator? And I think that the owner at the time, Jeff Cisneros, I think he kind of appreciated my, just kind of kicking the door down approach. And he gave me an opportunity to audition. And audition went well. They liked me. They thought that I was good, blah, blah, blah. And they made me into a commentator. And they kind of wanted me to be more of the color animated, type of commentator, because I didn't know as much about the sport as my other commentators that I worked with did. So they had me be more of the loud and the energetic type of kid. So I did that for a few shows, but I saw the ring announcer and I was like, I can do that. That's something that I can do. So I begged and I was like, hey, let me be the ring announcer. Let me be the ring announcer. Let me be the ring announcer. And he's like, and he finally let me do it. And looking back, I was terrible when I started. I mean, Jesus, it's hard to watch me now, but yeah, so I became a ring announcer, and a few people I think that, came up to me, a couple fighters and coaches, and they said, you're not bad. You got the right energy. You speak well. You may need to, refine a few things, but I think you're onto something here. And then I started doing more and more shows and started to get some people to follow me on social media. And I was like, okay, like, I think we're onto something here. And so I dedicated myself to it. I built a brand around it. I built a style around it. I attacked the industry, really intensely. I called every fight promotion. I auditioned. I did shows for free, all that kind of stuff. And I was able to build this brand around what I do. And fast forward, I'm 26 and flying to Dubai and announcing in front of millions of live viewers. I mean, it's been pretty crazy ride so far. But what I like is that, in my opinion, I'm nowhere even close to where I can be. And I'm a competitive mother effer, man. And I think I can be the biggest announcer in the world. I wholeheartedly believe that. And I'm going to attack it as if I was starting tomorrow. So
that's a fantastic story. We've kind of jumped back and forth between boxing and strongman a bit.
This is what I wanted. I wanted to jump back and forth because
man. Any chance, any transition there? Any chance that we can get you doing some announcing for strongman? So, a lot of the Neil Pickup comes to mind. A lot of the big, great announcers are in Giants Live only. But if we could get a nice presence in the U.S., maybe for official strongman games, or get the U.S. Announce. I don't want to say ring announcing, but arena announcing, let's call it, to be at that level, it would be awesome.
Well, I think that there's a good chance of that happening. Nothing is official, but I think that a couple comments were made here and there, and Colin Bryce was at the show. The guys that run World Ultimate Strongman were at the show. So if nothing else, I think that they saw, I had people come up to me and say they've never heard a Dubai crowd get that loud before, but I tend to have that effect on people. I think that naturally, I think that I do a good enough job that I think I make people comfortable getting energetic. My thing is and now I'm getting into the technical side of announcing, which I'm addicted to, is I've studied this. I've studied how to craft a brand, and I've gone outside the box with how I approach this. And, I'll give you guys an example. So again, like when I started, there was no frame of reference. The only reference that I had was watching other announcers. But unfortunately, if I just watch them, then at best I'll just be them. And I don't want to be them. Again, I love Bruce. I love Michael. I don't want to be them. People have I've gained traction on the internet. People have called me the next Bruce Buffer, right? Again, a hell of a compliment. I love that. I don't want to be Bruce. Truthfully, I want to be better than Bruce. So the point is that I had to get creative with kind of what I studied and where I gained inspiration from. So I studied opera singers. I studied stand-up comedians. I studied, very individualistic types of entertainers that I could draw inspiration from. So I think that I've crafted a sound and a style that I think people enjoy for the most part. And the Dubai crowd was really getting into it, and they were an awesome crowd. So I hope that the strongman people that were there maybe saw a couple things that they like. I hope they saw that I was a bigger guy and I would, I would make sense with the market. I stood eye level with Thor. So, he's one of the tallest ones they got. So I want to do that. I want to bring announcing to different industries. And while announcing already exists in strongmen, truthfully, and this is the competitive side of me, I don't think they've had it like me before. So I think that would be something cool for me to do. And I think that Thor and Eddie reacted well to it, and I think they know a thing or two. They've definitely heard announcers in their tenure being a strongman. So yeah, that is definitely something that I want to do. And so I hope that I can build some connections in that industry, and who knows? Who knows?
Yeah, definitely very excited to see something like that. And you can add Mind Reader to your resume, because I was just about to ask you about the science of announcing and what kinds of things you study to become a good announcer. Like, if you had to pick like 3 characteristics or qualities, like I have to get good at this thing, and this thing, what are they?
So I think, and again, it's how people attack it very differently. My focus when I announce is the fans. People focus on different things. I know some announcers are focused on pleasing the promoter, right? My mindset is, if the crowd is happy, the promoter's happy. If the crowd is into it, they're buying tickets, they're more engaged, they're drinking more. Everything is better when the crowd is energetic. You will never tell me that a boring crowd or a dead crowd is better than an energetic crowd. You'll never convince me of that. So everything that I do is focused on the crowd. So there's certain nuances and bells that I turn when I announce. For example, when I announce the main event, I don't say this is the main event. I say this is your main event. I'm always talking to the crowd. If you watch me announce, I look at my cards very rarely. I try to avoid looking at the cards because that allows me to engage with the camera. When I did my main event introduction, when I introduced Eddie and Thor, I say, I need everybody in the arena. I get everybody involved. Get up out of your seats, raise your drinks high. I play off of the things that are unique to the crowd. I address the crowd when I begin. I started the show off. Dubai, can you hear me? I address the crowd. You're in Dubai. You're part of the crowd. I am talking to you. I'm not talking to the fighter. I'm not talking to the referee. I'm not talking to the promoter. I'm talking to the person watching this. So, number one, and again, everyone's style is different. This is my style. I engage the crowd first. The crowd is the most important stakeholder. The crowd bought the tickets. The crowd watched the show. The crowd's going to buy all the merchandise, buy all the liquor, all that kind of stuff. Address the crowd. 2, there's a difference between, and it took me a while to get this right. I think I got it quicker than a lot of announcers do. I learned how to throw my voice. In the beginning of my career, I would yell. I don't yell anymore. In fact, the sound guy and the producer paid me one of the nicest, unique compliments I've ever heard. I was the first ever announcer that they've worked with that they didn't have to use an audio limiter. An audio limiter basically makes it to where you have to constantly be playing with how the volume on the mic is to match how the person is announcing. I figured out how to, it's hard to explain. I can be just as loud without yelling because I know how to, what I call, throw my voice. I know how to get my voice from here to there rather than just shout. Does that make sense? I know this is we're getting in the weeds here of what I do, but I'm a psycho with this stuff, man.
I love this kind of stuff. And by the way, that little intro I did for you at the beginning, I had to remove a lot of clipping, so I know what's going on.
Yeah. So the thing is that's tough. And to be honest, I wouldn't even tell an announcer to focus on that because, to be honest, I kind of think that you either know how to do it or you don't. And I think I've always just kind of, I don't know, for some reason, I've always just been I know how to be loud, but it's not ever shouting. Like, I very rarely have ever lost my voice. I don't lose my voice when I'm announcing. I did in the beginning of my career because I was very throaty. I would try to force it. Now it all comes from the diaphragm. I've studied, I've worked with a couple different singing vocal coaches and things like that. So I have an idea of what I'm doing there. So again, engage the crowd, know how to use your voice effectively. And a big one for me is pronunciation of names. I think this is a place that so many ring announcers just cut corners, and I think it makes the whole promotion and production look like crap. And Half Thor is a perfect example. That is a difficult name. Now, what's interesting though is that if you heard me in the press conference, I pronounced his name properly. His name is not Half Thor Bjornsson. It's Half Thor Bjornsson. That's how it's pronounced in Icelandic. And I did it in the press conference. I changed it for the announcement to make it sound a little bit more grandiose. B. I held the B. Everyone holds different vowels or different letters. I chose to hold the B. So I actually pronounced it differently for the announcement. I still think it worked. But as a general rule, know how to pronounce the names. And that would be a hell of a challenge with strongman, because they got those Eastern European names, which are I was going to say a bad word, but they're a pain because they're very unique with how they're spelled, and the vowel behavior is not indicative of normal English. Half Thor was only scratching the surface. I was reading the names of some of the people that just competed in Europe's Strongest Man, and I was like, I'm sure I could do it, but like they're tricky names. So pronunciation is a big one. So again, there's no secret sauce. John, you asked, are there top 3 things? And this is what I ran into when I started my career, is that there's no textbook. There's no, you do this, and then you do this, and then you do this. That doesn't exist. Everyone's style is different. If you want to be unique, you have to be unique. That's what I focus on. Everyone's going to be different, though. For example, a big thing that I focus on is the visual component. I focus a lot on what I wear and how I dress. Why? Because announcing, there's also a massive visual component as well. So I work with tailors and designers to make sure that I match the feel of the event. If I look like crap, in my opinion, being someone that's pretty on camera, pretty visual the whole time, I think I make the whole promotion look like crap. So again, there's a variety of things that you can focus on. I could talk about this for hours, but ultimately what it comes down to is you got to be unique. You can't be, if you're trying to become an announcer, you cannot be just the same old. The amount of announcers that use some variation of "Are you ready blank?" or "Are you ready to blank?" Just come up with something else. Mine is "Get wild," right? Very different from a lot of people, right? And so the thing is like, if you're going to be an announcer and if you want to stand out, then stand out. What I've said, and the term that I've used, is that there's a difference between an announcer and someone that reads names. And I've told this to promoters. I go, look, and because a lot of promoters, they don't like a flashy announcer. They don't like a more energetic announcer. They just want the announcer to read the names. I tell them, I go, if you just want a name reader, don't hire me. I'm not the one for you. But if you want someone that can enhance your brand, if you want someone that can engage your audience and add a whole different feel and dynamic to what you do, then I am your guy. So there's a difference between a guy that reads names and a ring announcer. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
go ahead, Isaac. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say too, it's funny that you're talking about the pronunciation and all that, because when we were first kind of getting started with this, one of our friends, Elwha Fournier, who runs the Strongman archives and all that sort of stuff, he's a reporter, but I feel like he's more of a historian than anything else. But when we first got started, he sent us both a list of all the current strongman names and the proper pronunciation for all the names and all that sort of stuff. And I was like, oh, this is the cheat sheet that everybody needs, so that we don't accidentally call someone something that they're not when we're going live. And so, yeah, I was gonna say, if you wanted to get into strongman, he may be a great person to reach out to, because he actually knows how to say everyone's name and all that.
He himself too. We were calling him Eloy forever, and it's a French name. It's Elwha.
Elwha.
How I've always done it. Again, kind of just giving some insight to your viewers about how I do my job. So, how I do it is, I always talk to the fighter. Whenever there's a name that I don't know, like, John Smith, I know that one. And obviously, I know some more unique ones, but if there's ever one that's like really tricky, I just ask the fighter, how do you want your name pronounced? And they'll always be bashful. They'll always say, oh, well, you can say it like this. And I say, no. How do you pronounce your name? Your name is your identity. It is the thing that is unique to you. Even if someone else has the same name, as a general rule, your name is how you identify. So the thing is I ask them how they pronounce it, and they tell me. And then what I do is I don't write it on my card how it's spelt. That'll just confuse me. I write it phonetically. I write it how it's said. So, for example, I already knew how to pronounce Half Thor's name, but if I just met Half Thor the day of the fight, how I would have wrote it would have been Byornson. That's how I would have wrote it. So I don't get, I just don't confuse myself the night of the show. So I write it phonetically. So how it would be if I did a strongman event is I would just go up to every strongman and just say, hey, man, how do you say your name? I'm about to announce it in front of thousands of people, possibly hundreds of thousands, if not millions that watch this content. How do you want it said? Do you want it said like this? Do you want to go by a nickname? I have no idea. Tell me what you want. So
what do you think, Isaac? Which would be the easiest name for Cody? Bobby Thompson?
Or probably Eddie Hall.
Luke Stoltman would be a pretty easy one. Eddie Hall was a pretty straightforward.
Eddie Hall is easy, yeah.
I actually knew how to pronounce Big Law's name, Shachle. I knew how to pronounce that because a lot of people just say Chalet. So
I almost never hear anybody say that one, right, including myself. And I heard Liz say it correctly on a video recently, so I'm trying to correct myself now.
Yeah. So again, it's those subtle nuances, and that also just comes from being around. One thing that I've been lucky enough from being around fighting is I've been around a lot of nationalities of people. There's very few ethnicities and nationalities that I haven't been around. I've announced East Asia, I've announced Eurasia, I've announced, Western Europe, I've announced South America. So I've announced, in fact, Thor was the first Icelandic one. So I can check that one off my list. But so I've been around names a lot. And I think that when you're just around it a lot, you can kind of, okay, yeah, this guy's from Russia. I know that they pronounce their A's like this, things like that.
That makes sense. I could see that. Yeah, so we're reaching the hour 15 mark. So we'll probably go ahead and start wrapping this up. Yeah. So just in final comments, any sponsors that you want to shout out, or anyone who helps you that you want to give a shout out to?
I mean, really, who I want to give a shout out to is I want to give a shout out to you two as well.
Thank you.
I appreciate you guys giving me an opportunity to get on here. Again, I said that I want to introduce combat sports to as many different people as possible. In my opinion, it's the best sport on the planet. And so I appreciate you guys having me on. I appreciate Core Sports and Segi TV for having me announce their show. I appreciate everyone that was involved with the show. But the biggest thing is I appreciate the people that watched it. Look, not everyone is going to like my work, and not everyone's going to warm up to me immediately. For example, I know the sunglasses turn a lot of people off, but it's part of my brand. It's part of how I'm unique. There's a story behind it. It's a great story, but ultimately the story just boils down to that I wear sunglasses because it's a way for me to stand out. It's a way for me to be recognized. It's a way for me not to just be that announcer. It's a way for however someone recognizes me, however someone remembers me, whether it's my announcing, whether it's my style, whether it's my sunglasses, whether it's my height. I don't give a damn. As long as you just, know who I am and enjoy my work. So I appreciate the fans that watched it. I thought that it was an awesome event. I thought that it was a massive success. Again, this fight, I think it grew both sports. I think that it was able to touch a lot of people from a lot of walks of life, from different parts of the planet. Strongman and fighting are international sports. Yeah, football is international, but not in the same way. It's an American sport. Yes, there's a variety of sports that may be international, but it's pretty relegated to a specific region. Strongman and boxing and are two very international sports. You guys have champions from random countries. We have champions from random countries, and we have fans from both. So the thing is it was cool for me to be in front of a new group of people. The fans were awesome in Dubai. I'm so thankful for the opportunity, and I hope that it allows me to extend my work into strongman. It was cool being around that. It was cool me learning about it. Like, what's an example? Like, I remember I didn't know that the strongmen are briefed on the competition before it happens. I didn't know that. I didn't know that Colin Bryce would meet with the competitors and talk about the lifts before the event happened. So that's an example of me learning something new from boxing, but yet again, just being involved in a different industry, I was able to learn something new. So
that's an integral part of the controversy between Eddie and Thor in 2017.
That's how I learned about it. So it was awesome, man. I got to announce a strongman competitor in the gym when I went to the gym with Big Laws, and I was able to his name was Ryan Malt. He's from England. I think he's getting ready for one of his earlier shows in his career. I was able to give him a main event introduction in the gym to get him hyped up for a lift. So I'm going to send that to all my strongman people and say, get me as an announcer. So again, I'm thankful for it all. It was an awesome experience. Thank you guys for having me on. I'd love to do a show again sometime. And who knows, guys, maybe in the strongman realm is where you'll see me announcing next. Who knows? We'll see.
Hey, listen, Isaac, we have the promoter from the Rainier Classic coming on next week. Maybe we can hook them up.
Yeah, we could do that. I was also thinking because Clash on the Coast is coming up with Anthony Furman, and I know he's trying to make that into a bigger show too. So maybe he might be looking for an announcer.
We'll see.
Maybe I'll shoot him a message and see.
Yeah, Big Mo, I'm a terrible marketer for myself, but I'm a great marketer for my friends.
Yeah, same here. Yeah,
I appreciate it. Yeah, I'm open to anything, guys, and I sincerely appreciate you guys giving me a new platform and a new audience to talk to. Thank you guys for watching this. Please like, share. Make sure you follow me on social media. That's where you can keep up to date with everything that I do. I'm on Instagram at official.bigmo. I'm on TikTok under the same username, and I'm on Twitter at official_bigmo. Bigmo_official. So make sure you guys follow me on social media. That's kind of my digital resume. That's where I share all my work. I'm very active on there. And who knows where I'll pop up next? We'll see. Thank you, John and Isaac. I appreciate you guys.
Appreciate you. You're welcome back anytime. Take care.
Yeah.
Take care.
Thank you for joining us. And everyone have a wonderful night.